And 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and share with somebody next to you. What answers did you get? Go ahead and share. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And ladies and gentlemen, back up here. Let me open by saying thank you. Thank you for being here. I know a lot of you are exhausted. A lot of you are stressed. A lot of you are tired. Many of you have taken 1 to 3 AP exams already. So I know you have been putting in a lot of work. So I appreciate you being here because I know that that work is on top of sports, on top of a musical, on top of choir performances, music performances, on top of dance, and I'm sure some of you do some sort of horseback riding or something, on top of everything else. And then, of course, addition, your parents want to, talk to you. So I just want to say thank you. I do appreciate you being here. This is our last night together because on Thursday, your AP World History worries go away, unless you still have my class, in which case you still have more worries. But it gets more fun, I think. So we have one more partial week. Just because I don't want you showing up on Thursday to any surprises, I'm going to go through again the checklist for you on Thursday. Number 1, your day on Thursday starts at 7:30 a.m., not 8 a.m. Do not show up at 8 a.m. You will be late. Because yes, the test starts at 8. But that means that you might be answering your first multiple choice question at 8. You still need to fill out all of the forms and things in order to make sure that the College Board knows that you are the one taking the test. So please, be at San Marcos on Thursday, which is normally a late start, but not for you. And you will be here at 7:30 a.m. You will remember a few things. Number 1, you will remember a few pencils. Please bring number 2 pencils. If you do the clicky lead ones, make sure that lead is number 2. I'm glad Cassie is checking right now, right? Make sure that you have number 2 lead. Second thing you need to bring, a couple of pens, black ink. Just bring black ink pens. We all know what happens to the pens that you pull out of that random drawer in your house that you shove in your pocket. In the middle of writing your essay, you run out of ink. So bring at least a couple pens. Yes. Yes. The multiple choice will be in pencil. Multiple choice will be in pencil. The short answer and the essays will be in pen. Yes, Melanie.
What if I make an error and I bring white out as well?
Just nice, neat line to cross it out, and you're fine. They'll know.
You can write, do not read this, please.
Or just whatever you do, don't do the whole scratch out thing. Just
Why not?
because you want it to look as nice as possible.
You can always just write different letters on top of it.
3! Back here. Please try to avoid the urge to talk to your neighbor at every second. 3, please bring yourself a water bottle. Bring yourself a water bottle, something to have. 4, bring yourself a snack. No, not Pop-Tarts. Bring yourself a healthy snack, an apple, a protein bar, something that is going to give you some sort of, something that's good for your brain and not just good for your taste buds. Does that make sense? And I know a lot of you are going to come in with your little big Tupperware. It's going to be nice and neat and organized. I'm just being Tupperware. Because you have to and I hate Tupperware. Yeah, government say don't use plastic.
No, he uses Tupperware.
Oh,
You love plastic.
I just think of all the water that you use to have to clean all the individual little things, and then you just put it all in one big thing, mix it in. It's going to all be a mix anyway. So,
On his mic, just like one hand carries an apple.
yeah. So, those are the 4 things that I want you to bring at 7:30 in the morning on Thursday. Also, bring a smile. Lastly, yes, probably need that too, and your ID card. I don't know. Yeah, don't forget your ID card. Lastly, and eyes up here again, if you're going to socialize, you might as well just go home. So, lastly, ladies and gentlemen, on Wednesday night, you're done. 8 p.m. You're done. You're done. Okay? Don't keep studying past 8 a.m. Give yourself a break. What did I say? I'm at p.m. You're done at 8 p.m. So make sure that you give yourself a good night's sleep. Make sure when you wake up in the morning, you have a good, solid breakfast. Give something that's going to give you energy. Does that make sense? That's important. The last thing you want to do is skip breakfast on the day of an AP exam because you're going to be absolutely exhausted afterwards. I guarantee it. Cool? That's it. That's all I got on housekeeping. Any questions on that? Yes, but not an Apple Watch. Because that has text messages. And same thing, like if you have a Fitbit or whatever that gets text messages, you're going to want to leave that at home too. Okay? Yeah. So, here's what, where's I going to go with this? The exam is structured as follows. You will come in, you will fill out all of the forms and let the College Board know who you are, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to try to find out what my teacher number is for those of you that took my class so that I can actually get accurate data instead of having to do that all on my own. If I have to, I'll do that. So I'm going to try to figure out what my number is, and that'll be something I'll try to get out as soon as possible. You will start with the multiple choice. There will be 55 multiple choice questions in 55 minutes. All of the multiple choice questions, as you heard me say a billion times, are going to have some sort of stimulus connected to them. That, in this case, it was a written document. It might be a visual. It might be a chart, a picture, something. But all of the images, Melanie, all of the images are going to, all the questions are going to have some sort of stimulus attached to them. Cool?
Yep.
You will then not have a break, and you will go straight into, Hannah, you will go straight into the short answer questions. There will be 4 short answer questions. At least 3 of them will also have a stimulus attached to them. It could be a short little secondary reading. It could be a primary source. It can be a painting, something. The short answer questions will always have 3 parts. It will most likely, I cannot promise, but it will most likely be A, B, C. For each part, you want to write at least 2 sentences because every single part of the question will say identify and explain. So you identify in one sentence and you explain in another sentence. It wouldn't hurt to add another explanation sentence. So between 2 and 3 per thing. Does that make sense? And if you're in my class, we did that on warm-ups at least 2 times a week. I forget how long you have on the short answer. I should just look it up when we do that. Is it 55? It's 50 minutes for 4 questions, so it's about 50, 5-0. So you have a little bit over 10 minutes per question. I usually gave about 10 minutes to do the short answer. Good, thank you for asking that, Jay. Then you have a break. After that break, you have a break, which, by the way, and I'm very serious about this. It depends on your proctor, but I'm very serious about this. You cannot talk about the questions in the hall during the break. They're going to tell you that. Take that seriously. The last thing you want is to have done all of that work and then have your scores thrown out. So just hold off until well after the test before you start talking about things. Does that make sense? Good. So you come back, and then you have an hour and a half, and you will be writing a document-based question and a long essay question. And you will have one huge block of time, an hour and a half, to do both of those. And no one's going to be telling you, oh, it's a good idea to start your long essay now. So you have to, So you have to time yourself in doing each of those. Cool? Any questions on the basic what to bring and what to expect? Yes, Connor. I think I see a hand back there. That break is your opportunity to use the restroom. So at 7:30 a.m., use the restroom. Sophie.
What's like the worst you can do in like section still pass?
They have a calculator, but I don't know if they have it for the new one. I don't know if they have it for the new one. I mean, traditionally it was you could get a 60% on multiple choice and still pass.
But like if you get 100% on the essay, or like if you get 100% on multiple choice,
Sure, Abigail. Yeah, sure. And Abigail, if you feel like you got 100% on both of those, get out. Go. Just go. There's no need. Actually, if you get 100% on both of those, you better stay. Because you better rock that. And you better get the highest score in the country. Which doesn't matter if those get 5. But, yeah. Sophie, last one.
is there a way to figure out like how
Ladies and gentlemen, listen to the question.
like you know how they give you like 1 to 2 3 4 to 5?
Yes.
Is there a way that you can figure out like how close you are to the other numbers? Like let's say you get 3.
So you're talking about your score?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I've never actually looked at that. They do. I think they do give you a breakdown as to what you got in multiple choice, what you got in the short answer, what you got on what you got in the essay portion. So maybe I'm not positive on that.
It's like a 3.1 weird
I agree with that statement. I'm not exactly sure what they do to calculate it. They do something. Okay, so let's move on to our short answer questions. And again, because of the amount of time that we have, we're going to go through this fairly quickly. So, ladies and gentlemen, remember, as you do these short answer questions, the first thing that you want to do, and eyes up here. Yes, Lacey. The what? What do you mean, what 3 groups? I have no idea. Just check the library. So, when you're looking at the multiple choice, what you want to do, ladies and gentlemen, in all seriousness, if you're here to socialize, just go. I'm not kidding. Go. And I won't take it personally, but we have work to do, and I'm tired of talking over people, right? Okay. So, when you go through the multiple choice, first thing you want to do is you want to read all of the answers. Please do process of elimination. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through these multiple choice questions when grading your exams, and I've had to go back and correct myself because I didn't read all the options. So, read all the options, do the process of elimination. So the first thing, the state's claim as prescribed in the first paragraph is best understood in the context of which of the following? Whew! So what's the statement in that first paragraph? What is he talking about? Oh, first paragraph. How about the anti-apartheid movement under foreigners or communists? So, ladies and gentlemen, this is talking about a global event that was happening. Therefore, D, economic nationalization? Nope. Not going to be a part of that. Decolonization? Maybe. Maybe. The non-aligned movement, which if in my class this semester we haven't talked about yet. But the non-aligned movement talked about there were groups in the global south that refused to try and quote-unquote date the Soviet Union and the United States. They refused to choose one or the other, and they said, we're not going to align with either of you. We're going to work with both of you. Does that make sense? This was spearheaded by, actually by Nehru in India and Abdul Nasser of Egypt. Both of those individuals were big in the non-alignment movement. Maybe. However, this is anti-apartheid, and this is when Nelson Mandela is about to go to jail. So he's not there yet. He's not going to be a non-aligned movement. And therefore, that leads me to the Cold War, which is clearly in the major event that would have under the influence of foreigners and communists. Because we know part of the Cold War has the United States and the Soviet Union competing for influence, particularly in those former European colonies of the global south. Does that make sense? Yes, no, maybe so? That was a tough one. I thought that was a pretty tough one. BB? I wouldn't say B. Yeah, because South Africa wasn't really part of South Africa's decolonization. Does that make sense? That would have been after South Africa's decolonization. They would have already gotten their independence from England, and they would have already been, yeah, the apartheid government would have already been a part of their history. Yeah.
Oh, so by that time, they would not have been under.
Yeah. 38, the economic conditions described by Mandela. In the second paragraph, it lead many former European colonies to embrace which of the following? Well, ladies and gentlemen, do any of them ever say, please, Europe, take us over again? Yeah, don't ever put A in that sense. The sale of state-owned land to Western entrepreneurs. They just tried to kick the West out. Why are they going to try to give up their land again? I wouldn't put B. The encouragement of immigration to Europe. That does happen, but I don't think that any place is wanting all of their people to leave and go to European colonies. So then you're going to see the implementation of redistributionist economic policies. C. That means giving out, essentially taking land and giving it back out to people. And last but certainly not least, which is a fun question, which of the following provided justification for the South African government policies as described by Mandela in the third paragraph? Well, what was he talking about in the third paragraph? The lack of human dignity experienced by Africans is the direct result of the policy of white supremacy. It's certainly not socialism. Liberal nationalism? No. Anti-imperialism? Yeah, we just hate ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, social Darwinism, and hopefully all of you got that one right, especially if you were in my class. Questions? Ladies and gentlemen, back up here. That's not an attempt to start talking to each other. Yeah. Postmodern era. Good. Any other questions? Okay, we're going to make a quick transition into our lecture section of this series. So go ahead and get ready. Again, as I am going through this, I don't expect you to be writing all of these things down. But what I do expect you to be doing is actively listening, writing things down if they seem new to you or if you need a bit of a refresher on it. But first and foremost, you should be listening. So we are in our last time period. Our last time period is the postmodern era. And in a lot of ways, this can be explained through the spread of a popular doll, Barbie. And so we'll look at how the postmodern era is really how the world is trying to figure out how to live in a Barbie world. Because as one of the main themes of the postmodern era, which is 1914 to present, is increased globalization and internationalism. The postmodern era takes everything that Europe uses as its sense of superiority during the modern era, shatters it, and then tries to find a way to pick up the pieces. So we're going to look at how both World War I and World War II marked that shattering moment of European superiority, and how European ideas of modernity are going to be greatly challenged. And instead of focusing on the development of individual nations that we saw through nationalism in the modern era, we're going to see nations really trying to figure out, how do we live in this increasingly entangled world? I mean, if you have a war that is happening because some Austrian archduke was shot by a Serbian, and you have Indians and Australians sailing and flying halfway across the world to fight over that just shows you how increasingly entangled the world has become. And so after World War I and World War II, the world is going to largely try to figure out, how do we do this? How do we live in an international world? So I've been kind of changing the way I teach this since this year. I've been saying how in the postmodern era we see the development of this idea of internationalism as opposed to nationalism. Does that make sense? So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to start with the causes for globalization. What is it that causes the people to realize that they are so entangled? And the first thing we want to look at are the world wars. And I know, I'm sorry, Sam, this is going to be a lot of things right all at once. We're looking at the causes of these world wars, and I'm going to be talking about them largely as one big giant event, because really, as you all discovered through your studying of World War I and World War II, they really are just one big conflict. World War I causes this massive amount of death and destruction, and then really it's just a bad breakup. Because come 30 or 20 years later, they're back at it again. And so we're going to look at what is it that causes them. Well, the first thing that we see causing the world wars are all of those isms that we saw developing in the modern era. First things first, the development of nationalism. Each of these European countries were extremely nationalist, extremely proud of who they were. And not only did that give them a sense of identity, it also gave them an us versus them mentality. So if you were German, you hated the British. If you were French, you hated the Germans. If you were British, you just thought you were awesome because you had the largest empire in the world and nobody else could really do anything. So the main idea is that nationalism really caused a lot of conflict between them. In addition, you also see alliances being created. You getting there? Yeah, we'll get there. We see alliances being created on nationalist agendas. For example, one of the more famous ones is going to be the Anschluss between Austria and Germany. And largely because they were two German-speaking countries, it was a natural alliance for them to make. Sarah?
Is this what we're doing for chapter 23 right now?
No, this is what you read in chapter 21.
Oh, I just did that part.
It's okay, Sarah. Another important alliance during that time was the union of Serbia and Russia, because they were both Slavic people. They spoke a Russian-style language, they both worshipped Orthodox Christianity, and they had similar cultural traditions, foods, dances, etc. And so there was this idea coming about called Pan-Slavism. Because the idea of nationalism wanted to take all people who had a similar culture, language, or understanding of the world and really create living space for each of them. The same thing is going to cause World War II. Hitler, Mussolini, the Japanese, all are heavily nationalistic. Hitler wants what's called Lebensraum, or living space, for the German people. Italy wants to create the Fourth Roman Empire. wants to create a new Roman Empire and really bring Italy back to its old glory days. Those fascists were just trying to promote a crazy, heavily nationalist propaganda. What have I done? Done nationalism. Good! Imperialism also causes it. Europe during the modern era has already developed all of its colonies overseas in Africa, in Asia, and yes, Oceania. See, I mentioned it once. In Oceania. And all of these colonies are really, what colonies are used as? They're used as a way to earn money, gain wealth, gain prestige. And so you wanted access to both supply and demand of resources. You wanted cheap resources, and you also wanted a guaranteed market in which to sell that. Competition for that became extremely fierce. And so this competition for who can have the biggest empire was one of the reasons why they were at each other's throats. This causes all of them to also practice militarism. And militarism becomes an incredible cause for both World War I and World War II. And both really start with Germany's incredible militarization. Starting with World War I. Germany, by the latter half of the 19th century, has become the most industrialized country in the world. And one of the things that they developed is the most industrialized navy and military, which actually outdoes and is greater than that of Great Britain. But what that causes between Great Britain and Germany is an arms race, because they're fighting to see who has the bigger guns. So, really, Trevor, nothing? That's all I got. You don't get anything for that? It's been a long day. You see an arms race between Britain and Germany that causes major conflict. With Germany becoming one of the major world powers, this upsets the balance of power in Europe and gets countries like Britain and France extremely nervous, which causes all of them to build up their militaries. Same thing happens in World War II. Adolf Hitler does it, and it actually goes against the Treaty of Versailles completely, and builds up his military, creating the most advanced military in the world with German tanks, with German planes, the Luftwaffe, what else did they have? Oh, submarines, of course, submarine warfare. So Germany, once again, becomes heavily militarized. And it's because of this build-up of military strength and this belief that a country is only as great as its military, that you see countries pumping up and working out and ready to fight. Yeah, okay. And then you want to talk about alliances as well. One of the things that really causes World War I and World War II are the creation of secret alliances that really go against, not really go against, but alliances that essentially set Europe up for a war. You see Germany, Austria, and Italy creating the Triple Alliance before World War I. France, Britain, and Russia creating the Triple Entente to essentially combat Germany. And you see both of these sides really forming even secret alliances with each other. Those backstabbing Italians formed a secret alliance with the French, which is why they switched sides once World War I started. You see the British also getting into a secret alliance with Belgium, which is why when the Germans invaded poor little waffle-making, chocolate-making Belgium in order to attack France, it brought Great Britain into the war. And so these secret alliances really cause a potential chain reaction that is going to cause this incredible, well, catastrophe, really. We talk about rivalries, we talk about ethnic disputes, we talk about colonial competition. Gosh, if we could talk about Kaiser Wilhelm all day, I would.
What ethnic dispute?
Say it again? Ethnic disputes is what I mean between Slavic and Germanic people, between the French. That's essentially part of these rivalries. In addition, World War II, you're going to see heavily German nationalism, which is going to be against anybody else, and Germany's believed that the Aryan race was the perfect race. The Aryan race was going to take any sort of Germanic people, which also included Nordic people from the north, even though the Nordic people didn't want to be part of it. It's going to include anybody who fits a certain mold. So it's those ethnic rivalries. Lastly, we talked about economic competition, but also for World War II, what causes World War II is an economic crisis. After World War I, with the incredible devastation and incredible debt that was incurred, most of Europe was largely reliant on U.S. loans. When the United States goes into its own Great Depression, that means those loans stop, which then sends the rest of the world actually spiraling into a depression. It is governments like communism and fascism, extreme governments, that people turn to in order to protect themselves economically, which then in turn puts crazy people in charge, and then those crazy people start a war. Yeah.
What's the name of the plan for like the U.S. loans after?
Dawes Plan. After World War I?
Yeah.
Or the Marshall Plan after World War II?
Marshall.
Well, that's after World War II, not after World War I. After World War I, that's the Dawes Plan. D-A-W-E-S. Good. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, and then of course I just talked about briefly, but I'll mention again, one of the causes for these wars are the radicalization of politics. You're going to see conservative monarchies that are trying to use nationalism in order to gain control starting World War I, and then after World War I ends, you're going to see people in a great confusion, a time of an age of anxiety, if you remember that DBQ that I gave you. An age of anxiety ensues, which all of you understand right now. An age of anxiety ensues, and people turn to extremely radical political parties that are promising them access to greatness once again. Kaiser Wilhelm was the king or Kaiser of Germany during World War I. He's one of the reasons why Germany militarizes so quickly, because he was born with a limp arm, and he didn't he kept falling off a horse, so he hated his grandma, who was the Queen of England. Yeah. Oh. Look at that. Oh, I saw these images that I should have gone through. There's Kaiser Wilhelm, ladies and gentlemen. He's going to be probably the best example of nationalism and militarism for World War I. He makes a great piece of evidence in an essay. Because Kaiser Wilhelm, as the leader of Germany, wanted to bring Germany into its place in the sun. He thought that Britain had an unfair advantage in building a global empire. He wanted Germany to have access to those resources. So what does he do? He builds up his military. He starts an arms race with Great Britain, and he also is responsible for increasing German nationalism, particularly German nationalism against Britain. He is actually the one who praises the German author who writes the Hymn of Hate. And the Hymn of Hate is the German Navy chant that pumps them up, gets them ready to fight, and it's all about how much they hate Britain. Yes, you too. And yes.
Is this the one whose two brothers were also, or two cousins were also
Yes.
leaders of Europe?
W-I-L. Kaiser is a title. It's a king. K-A-I-S-E-R. W-I-L-H-E-L-M. Kaiser Wilhelm the Second. So when we look at causes for world war as well, and we look at alliances and treaties, we would be fooling ourselves if we didn't talk about one of the major causes for World War II, which in fact was actually the reason and way World War I ended. After Germany actually self-destructs and falls apart towards the end of World War I, and a new provisional democratic Weimar Republic is created, they sign this peace treaty with the rest of the European powers. And that peace treaty largely leaves Germany in the ground. They lose 10% of their territory here. They lose all of their overseas colonies. They're not allowed to send any military people in this area. They lose access to the stupid Alsace-Lorraine. I hate Alsace-Lorraine. But they also lose control over their own coal and resources that they have. They're also not allowed to Axel-Tea. They're also not allowed to. Buy new military weapons. They're not even allowed to have an air force or a navy. So they're essentially left helpless. In addition, I forgot, they also have to pay $33 billion back in loans. Forgot about that. Yes, Abigail. Great question. Britain, France, Italy. How? Not well. which is why Hitler did. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. Is this is seen as largely the failure of democracy. These democratically elected leaders, you have David Lloyd George, who was a Prime Minister of England, somebody who was democratically elected. Lax's life, please stop talking. You have George Clemenceau, who was also elected in France. You have President Woodrow Wilson. I don't really know what Vittorio Orlando's official title was. I assume he was elected, but he didn't really matter because nobody listened to him. So you have these three men who are largely deciding the fate of Germany. Woodrow Wilson wants to create peace with the 14 points, and the other two, all they want to do is bury Germany. And so they largely create a peace treaty that is geared towards revenge. And so your democratically elected leaders essentially cause World War II. Does that make sense? Yes.
Why, like, specifically just Germany?
Great question. That goes back to the causes of World War I. The reason that France gets involved is because Germany declares war on them. The reason Britain gets involved is because Germany attacks through Belgium, the poor little waffle and chocolate makers, and brings Britain in. Much of the war is fought in French countryside, and much of the war is really fought between Germany and everybody else. Austria was a declining power. The Ottoman Empire was the sick man of Europe. So Germany is really the spearhead and seen as the one who is responsible for a lot of the aggression that causes it. And in addition, out of all of those powers, they would say Germany is to blame. Germany would be like the big brother that would get the responsibility. You understand that. It's always Ben's fault.
But I'm always on the
Oh, fair enough. So that's World War. That's why World War I ends, and essentially how World War II begins. Because Melanie, Emily, shoot!
It always happens.
I know, and especially you guys are sitting right next to each other. Treaty of Versailles. Ladies and gentlemen, with this you see the radicalization of politics and the creation of the fascist ideology. I don't necessarily have time to go into fascism into extreme detail, but essentially it is based on a few things. Number one, it's heavily nationalistic. Number two, it requires a single, all-powerful leader that you give up much of your rights. It actually says in Mussolini's speech on defining fascism that you maintain only the liberties that are essential, which is essentially none of them. The state has total control, and your identity, your economic person, your life is dependent upon your existence as part of the state. The state is everything. Add that with a strong military. This is when physical education becomes extremely important in high schools and schools around countries because they want to prepare people for war. And so each of these have little youth organizations so they can do push-ups, so they can fight. Wah, wah, wah. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, impacts of world wars. Impacts of world wars. It would be incredibly silly if we left out the obvious environmental impacts of these world wars. And largely these environmental impacts are because of incredible new technology. Industrialization also causes the failure of Europe because it's due to industrialization and the development of new science and technology that humans are even able to create this incredible amount of destruction. In World War I, it's the first ever use of tanks. It's the first ever use of extremely heavy artillery, other than which even more than cannons. It's the first ever use of flamethrowers. The first ever use of, well, except for Greek fire, but the first ever use of poison gas, chemical warfare, in order to burn people alive. And also the first use of airplanes, which, by the way, were highly ineffective. When your bombing campaign starts with, right, and when your bullets are going through your propeller, that's a problem. But either way, you see the development of this technology. It only gets improved in World War II. And probably the biggest example of new technology that causes incredible environmental destruction is the development of the atomic bomb through the Manhattan Project in the United States. Yes, the Nazis were also developing an atomic bomb, but you're welcome because the Norwegians stopped it. And if it wasn't for Norway, this whole world would be completely different.
Why?
Because because Hitler's, I don't understand the science. You can ask the AP chemistry students on their skis. They skied down with their guns and did a surprise sabotage attack and blew up his. It's not a joke. It actually happened. It's not a joke. The Norwegians were trained by the British secretly, and the Norwegians skied in, destroyed the heavy water plant, and Hitler was no longer able to make an atomic bomb. You're welcome. You can fact check it. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, mass casualties is incredible. New rivalries are created. After World War I, we already see new rivalries being created, essentially Germany against the world. After World War II, the new rivalries that will be created are going to be the start of the Cold War, which is going to be the United States versus the Soviet Union. You're going to see resettlements. New countries are going to be created. The maps of Europe and the maps of Southwest Asia are going to be redrawn. This is after World War II, is the creation of Israel. In 1947, first the British and then eventually the United States creates the nation of Israel as a place for Jewish people to have a homeland after the horrors of the Holocaust. Oh, that was stupid of me. I am incredibly sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, in both World War I and both World War II, you have the incredible loss of life and the intentional taking and trying to eliminate a group of people. That's called a genocide. In World War I, the Turkish government did it against the Armenians, using their technological capabilities to try to wipe out the Armenians. In World War II, as many of you know, Hitler tries to wipe out the Jewish people using their scientific advancements in technology. It's pretty incredible when you think about a single event called the Wannsee Conference, when you have the smartest Nazi officials sitting around the boardroom trying to find the most efficient way to eliminate a group of people, using the degrees that they have for that sort of purpose. It's pretty freaky to think about that meeting. Okay? I didn't kick you. Good. You also have the fall of an empire. Yes, Disney. Yes. You also have... I don't know. Don't do it till the postmodern era. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, you also have the fall of empires. In World War I, you have not only the fall of the Ottoman Empire ceases to exist, but you also have the fall of the Russian Empire. Because of the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, you see the creation of the first ever communist country called the USSR. And lastly, a cause of an effect, of World War II is going to be decolonization. After World War II, Europe has no sense of superiority to stand on, and so therefore their entire justification for imperialism is gone, and these countries begin to declare themselves independent. Yes?
So what's the difference between the Russian Empire and the USSR?
The Russian Empire is under an all-powerful Tsar and is largely a modern empire. And the Soviet Union is a communist society, a communist nation.
Okay, so not much chance of but they were still pretty weak too. What's up?
No, Soviet Union was not weak. Stalin. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, let's look at the next event that sees essentially the postmodern, that really marks the postmodern era. Again, ladies and gentlemen, please help me out here. I understand you're all sitting with your friends and you're having fun on Snapchat, but let's please make sure we focus. Okay? The last event is the Cold War. So let's look at the causes. The causes really going to be the competition between capitalism and communism. After World War II, Europe no longer has a leg to stand on. They're in debt, they have just had extreme massive casualties, and they require the help of both the Soviet Union and the United States to end Nazi oppression in Europe. And so the two superpowers that remain are the United States and the Soviet Union. And while the world was largely dominated by Europe during the modern era, during the postmodern era, it is these two superpowers that are going to be directing affairs in the world. And they both represent almost opposite ways. The same goal. The same goal is to try to figure out how to live in this international community. Under the United States, that's going to be free market capitalism. Under the Soviet Union, that is going to be communism. And it is this direct conflict, because both of them cannot survive with the other. In order for free market capitalism to work, people should have access to trade with anybody around the world in order to get the best price for resources. In order for communism to work effectively, everybody needs to be sharing all of their resources under the control of a centrally planned government. And so either of them are unable to work together. It has to be opposite. And so this is going to cause a major rift in the world, and largely the drawing of lines. What's in the impact of the Cold War is the creation of what's called a bipolar world. That's actually going to be a term that could be used on the AP exam. A bipolar world, talking about those opposite ideologies. This is probably best seen with the creation of two defensive alliances, which is slightly ironic because the world has just ended. The world has just gotten out of World War I and World War II. That was largely caused by these sorts of alliances. But after World War II, and because of the beginnings of the Cold War, you see the United States create a defensive alliance in order to protect against any sort of attack by the Soviet Union. This is called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, otherwise known as NATO. When Joseph Stalin... Oh yeah, good. No, we'll go for it. This will be fun. So, what Stalin does then is he creates his own pact, and that is being known as the Warsaw Pact. And really, when we look at this, it's really the difference between Trevor Eubanks' style and Justin Lehman's dating style. They both have two completely different dating styles, and it's really Ryan. Dang it! Justin, I tried. Well, Ryan, yeah, Justin, yeah, okay. I might have used Justin last year. I might have. I definitely did. I think I might have used Quinn too, which is just hysterical. Anyway, Trevor and I'm going to say it again, Trevor and Ryan dating styles. Because, ladies and gentlemen, Trevor's a lot like Harry Truman. When Harry Truman creates the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, one of the ways that he wants to encourage people to be a part of this defensive alliance is by wooing them with cash. So when Trevor tries to provide financial incentives for any sort of date that he goes on. And so Trevor, very much so, when he picks a young lady up, he rents a nice car, he puts on a nice polo, or a Patagonia, I should probably say. He also shows up with really nice flowers, not the ones from Bonds, like he actually goes to the farmer's market and gets them, fresh and weird looking. He then takes her to a very nice dinner, maybe even to Piscucci, who knows. But Trevor tries to woo this young lady by showing her that if she sticks with him, she's going to live the easy life. And I know some of you are already looking at Trevor saying, that's interesting. And so that's exactly what Harry Truman tries to do. Harry Truman tries to provide loans to the rest of Europe. And that's called the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan provides $13 billion to aid to Western European countries in order to help them rebuild. By giving financial incentives, Harry Truman was hoping that Western Europe would continue to remain capitalist and trade with the United States. Now, Ryan Lehman's a little bit different. Because when Ryan goes on a date and decides to try to ask a young lady out, he does not give financial incentives. He simply just takes his big lacrosse stick, his big goalie stick, and he just catches her and says, "Baby, you're mine." And anybody who tries to get near her, he's going to check, he's going to slash, he's going to do all the illegal things. He may even take his cleat and rake him. But the idea is, Ryan, I'm not going to say Justin. Ryan Lehman is a lot like Joseph Stalin in that. Because when Joseph Stalin decides to create the Warsaw Pact in Europe, Joseph Stalin's not going to ask Eastern Europe's permission. He's simply going to just say, hey, baby, you're mine. And just like Ryan, dang it, just like Ryan, I'm going to do this all night, I'm sorry. Just like Ryan, he's an extremely jealous man. And so, like Ryan would do when he dates a young girl, he says, you're not allowed to talk to any other guys or else. And that's what Stalin does. He creates the Iron Curtain directly through the middle of Europe. And that's part of the creation of this bipolar world. You see a quite literal separation between Western and Eastern Europe. Thank you, Trevor and Ryan, for being willing participants. Now, good. Now we talked about competition over Europe. This competition actually greatly extends outwards. Because like I said, one of the major events that's also happening at this same time is decolonization. And these former European colonies in Africa, Asia, and Oceania are now declaring independence. And in their independence and infancy, the United States and the Soviet Union are going to try to entice these new countries in order to be their allies. And so you not only see competition within Europe, but you also see competition within the Third World, or otherwise known as the Global South. This will often cause a lot of conflict. This is where you see the hot spots of the Cold War in Korea, in Vietnam, in Latin America, in Afghanistan, and of course in places in Africa, which is still kind of dealing with these issues today. So the competition for allies within the Third World are going to create momentary hotspots in a Cold War. So while the United States and the Soviet Union never actively fight each other, they come close to it in the Global South. Does that make sense? No! Well, I don't really know what I want to do. Another major competition that you see between the United States and the Soviet Union is the nuclear arms race. Much like Britain and Germany, as they were fighting for who had the best navy, the United States and the Soviet Union are going to be competing for who has the biggest bomb. It starts with the development of the atomic bomb. In 1942, 45. In 1945, the United States is the only country that has it after World War II. Then the Soviets develop it. So the U.S. develops the hydrogen bomb. So then the Soviets develop the hydrogen bomb. And so then they both begin to invest heavily in science technology and rocket technology that is hidden by the space race. But the whole reason for the space race is because they're trying to figure out how can we shoot a nuclear weapon from one continent to the other. So after the hydrogen bomb, it's a race for intercontinental ballistic missiles. And then once they're both able to do so, then it's just how many can we build. And so the United States and the Soviet Union both built incredibly high and heavy nuclear arsenals, ready to fire them quite literally at any moment's notice. There were steps taken and buttons ready to be pushed at somebody's direction. So there were a few times that this actually came extremely close, most notably in the nuclear arms race. Yes, Sophie.
Is that Stalin?
No, that is Brezhnev. We're not there yet. That is actually Brezhnev. Ladies and gentlemen, the Soviet Union does not last, though. Mostly because of this incredible competition with the United States, and mostly because of the inability of the Soviet Union to keep up with the quality and availability of consumer goods. The Soviet Union eventually does dissolve. And of course, just to help you remember, to go through these Soviet leaders and kind of their different policies, the Soviet Union starts with the radical ideas of Marx. Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Bolshevik Party, trims that down into a revolutionary goatee. Then you have Joseph Stalin, who takes power after Lenin has a stroke, and all he wants to do is grow his power mustache and make Bailey swoon. All he wants to do is grow his massive power mustache and keep and gain and maintain power and make the Soviet Union incredible. He does so largely by killing about 20 to 30 million people. After Joseph Stalin goes through his great purges and then eventually dies, the leader after him wants to take it easy a little bit, so he eliminates all hair, and that's Nikita Khrushchev. But the problem is Nikita Khrushchev is seen as weak, not only at home, but also abroad. He is the Soviet premier that loses the Cuban Missile Crisis to John F. Kennedy. Because of that, his not predecessor, but the person after him, Leonid Brezhnev, most known for his incredibly bushy eyebrows, restores a policy of harsh repression in the Soviet Union, something called the Brezhnev Doctrine, which, again, a lot like Justin, says that if any of... Ryan... I'm really not. Like Ryan does, it essentially says if any country tries to leave the dominion of the Soviet Union, he has the ability to take his tanks and force them to do that at gunpoint. Good. Oh, after Leonid Brezhnev, you then have the last Soviet premier of Gorbachev, who again wants to go away from these harsh repressive tendencies and try to allow for some innovation within the Soviet Union. That innovation was done by three policies. Glasnost, which is cultural openness, perestroika, which is economic openness, putting a little capitalism in there, and then democratization. This leads to the eventual dissolution of the Soviet Union, which of course Gorbachev and his massive birthmark goes, no! So then you have Marx, Lenin, Stalin, Khrushchev, Brezhnev, Gorbachev. Causes of globalization, of course. So now we're going to get into outside of the outside of the realm of the Cold War is the incredible feats that the world has made in technology. I can't tell you how incredible this is, because if you think about it, for a majority of human history, humans were walking around with some stone tools and hunting and gathering. The agricultural revolution was an absolutely incredible event where humans began to settle down and create civilization. And then, what is that? 12,000 years later, we're sending people to the moon. That's a fairly incredible, small amount of time for incredible innovation. And really, if we were to draw a chart of human innovation, it would go something like this. This would be the agricultural rev, which gets up to the industrial rev, which then gives us, you are here. So a pretty incredible amount of technology. What causes us to be increasingly together? Well, again, the development of certain types of technology, the first being the radio. That's what your grandparents probably did for entertainment instead of staring at their phone all day. They would sit around with their family and listen to radio. They couldn't see anything, but they would use what's called an imagination. And so, with their imagination... Yeah, no, I don't know if you really know what an imagination is, because it's not on Snapchat. Anyway, I have a highly imaginative Snapchat. Ladies and gentlemen, the telegraph and the telephone are ways of communicating instantaneously, which are all developed in, late modern era, early, and then into the postmodern era. The television, which is a pretty incredible thing, to be able to watch somebody who's not actually there in front of you. And especially when you look at the development of satellite television and eventually the creation of probably the biggest thing that brings people together, and you understand, is the internet. I'm not going to go through all of these things, largely because your science teachers probably will. But there's also scientific discoveries that largely challenge the ideas that were around during the modern era. The first is going to be the theory of relativity by Albert Einstein. The quantum theory of how incredibly small molecules and particles are, it just amazes me. And then, of course, the Big Bang Theory, which many see as a direct challenge to the superiority of Christianity, that it had such a hold in Western culture for a majority of the modern era, early modern through the modern era. In agriculture, something that really shows humans coming together is something called the Green Revolution. Another way that Harry Truman, like Trevor, wanted to date other countries, and particularly third world, is Harry Truman wanted to also provide economic and agricultural incentives for countries in the third world. Harry Truman said, if we can do all of these things with technology, why can't we also improve farming? Thus, the start of #GMOs. With the Green Revolution, scientists found ways to make food grow faster and more plentiful. This causes a lot of other different issues as well, but largely this causes an incredible increase in population, but also in some cases the increasingly stratification of social hierarchies in other places. Lastly, the development of travel and leisure. Humans can go anywhere they want in the world at any point in time, thanks to the development of planes, thanks to the development of trains, and again, thanks to automobiles, which if you, anyway, there you go. What are the major impacts of globalization? And again, I'm going through these things incredibly quickly, and by no means is this comprehensive, but it's giving you a basic idea of what we're looking at. One of the major impacts, again, is the Green Revolution. GMOs, #feed the world, #organic kills, because GMO, and if you don't like GMOs, you want people to go hungry. That's essentially it. If you're all about that organic lifestyle, only go to the farmer's market. If your carrot doesn't have a nipple on it, you're not going to eat it. It's because you want other people around the world to go hungry, because GMOs were there in order to stop and end world hunger. So there, think about that. Please don't actually eat. Please eat organic. Medical innovations as well. Ladies and gentlemen, it's pretty incredible how humans don't die. We live until our 80s, in our 90s. There's some guy around the world who's claiming to be 140 something. The country that he's from didn't start making birth certificates until apparently 20 years after he. So. But the oldest French woman that's still alive is 120. So either way, you have people who are living to an incredible amount, and that's because of vaccination. Oh my goodness, get vaccinated. Please get vaccinated, because when I go to Disneyland, I don't want to fear getting a disease that has been eradicated from the world. If I get mumps because one of you decided not to get vaccinated, Ladies and gentlemen, another thing too is we have a crazy increase in population thanks to the development of birth control. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Environmental destruction. Global warming. Obviously, we see because of the incredible use of resources and the incredible use of fossil fuels, and really because of the incredible amount of population, the amount of cows it takes to feed people from McDonald's and In-N-Out, you see the degradation of the environment. And a majority of scientists agree. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if I have to yell over you, this isn't going to be worth it for me. So, a majority of scientists agree that we do have warming temperatures around the world that are causing major issues, which has also sparked another thing. So, while I'm talking about all of these quote-unquote issues of globalization, one of the other cool things about globalization are global movements. Movements that are no longer just in one region, but are things that the entire world can get around. And one of those, particularly recently, starting with the 60s, but then incredibly increasing lately, is environmentalism. The fact that the United Nations even had a summit on combating climate change, which it's not actually funny. It's really not funny at all. But there are those little island nations in Polynesia who were going to the UN Summit for Climate Change because they're afraid that their countries are going to disappear as the water levels rise. And so I'm thinking about these little small island nations saying, "Hey guys, what the heck?" And then other nations kind of saying, "What?" So there are nations that are quite literally on the verge of extinction if people don't do things about it. Of course, we have, because of the growing population and the increasing consumerism, you have things like deforestation, pollution, and smog. One of my favorite stories from my buddy who used to work in Shanghai was that every time he walked outside and then walked back inside, he felt like he had to brush his teeth because he actually would get a layer of grossness just from standing outside. And it wasn't until the Olympics in Beijing that the communist government in China, China's still communist, oh boy, don't break my heart. The communist government in China actually said, yeah, guys, it's smog. Yeah, it's not a fog. We've been telling you it's a fog for all these years. Whoops. So there is that in China. Of course, Miss Tilton in hashtag AP Bio would tell you that the extinction rate for animals is also greatly increasing. What's the newest one? Do you know, Valentina? Okay. Sophie. I mean, no and yes. You don't know any better. Because you know what smog is. If you don't know what smog is. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, what we've also seen is incredible competition over finite resources. With the availability to communicate with each other and transport goods over long distances, is of course the competition over these finite resources. Probably the biggest thing in my lifetime was or earlier lifetime, which isn't that long, but was the competition for oil. So when I started driving, gas prices were soaring. We're talking over $5 a gallon. And so that was during my time when we started to see real competition over oil really heating up. That's nowhere near as bad as the 1970s gas lines, where you would actually be given a number and you were only allowed to get gas on certain days of the week. And so you actually had to plan that, and then you had to wait in line for hours in order to get gas. The newest resource that we are going to see a major competition over is water. And of course, living in Santa Barbara, we understand that struggle better than most. Ladies and gentlemen, I forgot one that I want to make sure, actually I forgot two that we were talking about. Number one is the spread of disease. With humans interacting with each other at an ever-increasing rate, guess what? We can also spread new diseases to places that didn't have them before. You probably, Ebola was only like 3 or 4 years ago, so you probably remember the great outbreak of Ebola, which a lot of people in the United States made jokes about, which is really not funny at all. But it almost became a global pandemic. The most recent one is the Zika virus that we saw happening because of people being afraid of going to South America and catching this virus. And now we have mosquitoes in the United States. And I think, in fact, there's at least one case of Zika in Santa Barbara County that this is a global disease. The College Board will want you to know at least two. The College Board's going to want you to know about the spread of HIV/AIDS. HIV/AIDS, which starts as a disease in Africa and then spreads all around the world, and especially in the 70s and 80s, causes massive amounts of death. 1918 influenza is probably one of the most incredible stories in history that I can even tell you, because we know the incredible amounts of death caused by World War I. I want to say it was around 12 million or so, possibly even more. I think 12 million was the number that Russia lost alone. We'll say, I don't remember. Either way, the incredible amount of lives lost in World War I is matched when in 1918 a strand of flu breaks out in the trenches in Spain and then spreads out all across the world. So you actually have the same number of people, in fact maybe even a little bit more, dying of the flu in 1918 compared to World War I, which is pretty incredible. I would do HIV and the influenza virus, especially in 1918. And then lastly, health concerns. Ladies and gentlemen, with new diets, with the ability, it's pretty awesome for us as a society to be able to go into a grocery store and choose the type of foods that we want. That was not available to the majority of humans for the majority of civilization. You went to a market and you got what was there. Otherwise, you didn't have any other choice. For us, we have new issues. Instead of just trying to figure out, can we get enough calories to eat, we actually have to think about limiting our caloric intake. And in addition, with all the junk that we're eating, like fried chicken from Vons, all the junk that we are eating, we're also seeing new health concerns. And one example I give you is the development of diabetes. Oh my gosh. Okay. That is. Oh gosh, I was trying to think of that too. It's not. Oh, what's her name? I really just can't remember. I really can't remember. I'm sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, here are the impacts. Yes, Connor. Yeah. That's the point. Is that you would have it was a slow process. That's what I'm saying. You could just go to a grocery store where the shelves were stocked every day. Their availability of goods would drive the price, and that availability of goods would vary between whether or not those ships made the trek or not. And so, no, I mean there'd be markets that would have it. It just wouldn't be as readily available. So it might be a couple of months before you get a new shipment. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, the political impacts, which I'm going to go through fairly quickly, is decolonization. One of the first biggest ones is decolonization. Decolonization is the process in which those former European colonies gain their independence. It's literally the opposite of imperialism. And I've already talked about a few of them, but these are largely run by organic nationalist movements within those countries. And just to hit home something, when Europe conquers places in the modern era, they are going to create a new class of people who are the educated, Western-educated elites. Those same Western-educated elites who were people who had all of the benefits of being a part of European empires, like education, like access to resources, all the new inventions. They are going to be the ones who actually lead these movements. And so you have the development of what's called national congresses in many places, using the very things they learned in Western education against the Europeans themselves. The most known one, most national congress, is the one that was led by and spearheaded by Gandhi, and that's going to be the Indian National Congress. In Africa, you're also going to see the creation of the African National Congress, which is going to be eventually spearheaded by Nelson Mandela, even though he's going to do so from jail, which he spends an ungodly amount of years, 20-something years, in prison. Oh, there you go. India, Gandhi, and South Africa, Mandela. There are decolonization and new independence movements elsewhere as well. And each of these countries are going to have their own way of doing so. Africa is going to largely be left in shambles as it repeats essentially the same process that Latin America did right after its independence in the modern era. They're going to be going through a bloody battle of different military dictators who are just fighting and killing each other over power. And so Africa is just starting to become a little bit more stabilized, although there are still incredible amounts of conflict in Africa. You're going to see the political alliances that are going to develop. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization is going to be but one of them. You're going to have the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, the Central... No. I forget what CENTO is. We talked about the Warsaw Pact. Probably the biggest alliance, and probably the thing that you need to know, one of the most important things out of the modern era and this impact of internationalism, is the creation of the United Nations. And the United Nations is something that is fairly unprecedented, except for the League of Nations, but it's fairly unprecedented. It's a forum that meets in the capital of the world, which is New York City. It meets in New York City, it's not Boston, but it's the capital of the world, where countries can send delegates to discuss global issues. And the United Nations also will try different international crimes in something called the International Criminal Court, which actually has its prison in not Amsterdam, not Alcatraz. Did you say Alcatraz? No. It has its prison in The Hague in Holland, which is not the Netherlands. Thank you. The Netherlands. Yes. Tiffany.
I was wondering, does the United Nations contain like all the countries in the world? Does it contain them?
I hesitate to say all, but most. Yes. No, just most.
Is Russia?
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, you also see with decolonization and part of this a movement of nonconformity, and this is something that I talked about a little bit before, but just the non-alignment movement, which is going to be run by prominent, decolonized, newly independent global South states. The most notable is going to be Egypt under Abdel Nasser, and then in India under Jawaharlal Nehru. Nehru actually calls the first International Black Congress the first Congress of all black or dark individuals, colored-skinned individuals from around this newly independent world without any sort of European or Western influence invited. It's a pretty foundational movement. In addition, you do see something that all of you kind of wish you could be a part of: student protests in 1968. As part of a push for an ever-changing world, students in France, in the United States, and across Europe, Czechoslovakia actually one of the main ones there too, actually begin to challenge their teachers, riot in the street, and demand new curriculum to be taught that will help them in an everly globalized world. And this actually causes massive protests and demonstrations that turn extremely violent in 1968. Pretty fun thing, yeah. This one? Oh, the idea is in 1855, Europeans sent Europeans to the colonies, and in 1955, one of the things that I don't know why I'm doing that, but one of the things that also come out of it is colonials oftentimes migrate to former European colonies in search for work. The most notable is Algerians go to France. You see Palestinians and Indians and other former British colonies going to England, and which is why English food is terrible. But if you go to England, you get great Indian food. So that's one of the things there. The anti-nuclear movement is one of those that's an international event. And then, of course, probably one of the most crazy things in order to protest China's occupation of Tibet, you see Thich Quang Duc self-immolation, or essentially burning himself alive. And the idea is by burning himself alive and doing so in a very calm, he's a Buddhist monk who did this, and doing so in a calm manner shows how incredibly emblazoned and passionate they are and furious at the treatment of Tibet by China. And that's something that causes major sparks and protests across the world. Nice, last one. Okay, last slide, and then we're going to do our, whoa. Oh yeah, the revenue model, that's what I meant to look at. Oh no, we have one more after this, good. Okay, impacts economic. Mr. Winter, sorry. This is just going to be it. Ladies and gentlemen, probably the biggest impact across the world because of globalization is the incredible interconnectedness of the global economy. The saying goes, if the United States sneezes, then the rest of the world could get a cold, right? And the idea is because we're so interconnected, because the United States, in order to even run or create products, you have to have the cotton from Malaysia, then it's produced in Mexico, then it's sold in the United States. I mean, there's just an incredible amount of interconnectedness to our economy, and that's part of being within this global economy. So what does that mean? One of the things that you're going to see is the development of competition. And competition is going to be the development of these transnational corporations. These are TNCs. Corporations that may be based in the United States or in other places, but will have offices all around the world. Many of the places, even in Goleta, like Raytheon or Curvature or any of these businesses, are going to have offices all around the world. The most famous of these transnational corporations, you guessed it, Mattel, the toy company, the Dutch Royal Shell Company, which many of you maybe get your gas from, Hershey's Chocolate, which no longer is in Pennsylvania. They're actually producing their chocolate in Mexico, which much to my chagrin because I used to go there as a kid. And the creation of organizations to try to combat Western incursion. Some of these organizations, most notably the Oil Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, is a group of mostly Middle Eastern countries and Venezuela, who try to set oil prices in order to maintain control over the oil economy. So you have transnational corporations that are largely based in places like the United States, but are taking advantage of cheap resources and cheap labor in all parts of the world. So when labor is too much in one place, they simply just set up a new factory in another place around the world where labor is cheaper, which is why much of the manufacturing in the United States has now been moved to other countries around the world. There's also a huge push, because of largely under the leadership of the United States, for the development of free trade. Woohoo! Free trade! Probably one of the first things that we see being developed to try to do this and try to create economic cooperation is the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF. Both of these are organizations that provide loans to developing nations in order to help their economies grow. The thought is, by providing these loans, places are going to be able to continue to trade with others. Then, of course, you have the World Trade Organization, which is going to set regulations and try to increase trade opportunities. That's the WTO. And then, of course, regional free trade organizations that allow for cooperation within certain boundaries. I'll start with NAFTA, even though they were the last ones on there. But the North American Free Trade Agreement is NAFTA. That's the agreement between countries of North America that try to reduce boundaries to trade, reducing tariffs, allowing for freedom of movement and workers. The European Economic Community, which is now the European Union, which is currently under fire right now. The EEC, now the EU, is probably one of the most incredible local free trade agreements. Not only does the EEC or the EU create a single currency for the majority of Europe, they also eliminate boundaries for workers. So if you live in Spain, you can then easily move to France without any sort of issue. It's why traveling in Europe is so easy. You only need one passport. And that's largely due to working. And the idea is, by cooperating instead of competing with each other, you can increase the economic viability of of a specific region. This has its pitfalls, though, most notably in Spain and Greece, which is largely in debt to many other European countries because of their inability to pay their taxes. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. It's another free trade agreement, you guessed it, of Southeast Asian countries. Economically, there's also relief organizations that are created. I don't think I need to explain the Red Cross or UNICEF or, again, the United Nations. These organizations are trying to promote the cooperation of the world in order to help grow international community. State control. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the major impacts of the postmodern era, and particularly economics, is the incredible new responsibility of governments within the economy. Whether you're in a communist country or a capitalist country, the government is going to butt into your life economically. And that's largely seen as a good thing, a positive thing, but in some cases can be bad. We know both communist countries, particularly the USSR and China, you have the state actually dictating how the economy is going to work, largely pushing for industrialization and collectivization. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're done, you can go. If you're done, you can go. If you'd rather just socialize and talk or look at your phones and Snapchat each other, then please just get out, because I'm feeling a little bit disrespected and I'm going through a lot of things for you. So if you don't want to be here, you got better things to do, please get out, because you're wasting your time and you're wasting others' time. So you see in communist countries, particularly the USSR and China, the government actually running the economy, centralizing the economy, and telling people what to produce, how to produce it, and when to have it produced by. In capitalist countries, that doesn't mean there's no government intervention. And particularly in Europe, you have the creation of welfare states. Instead of the government saying, your life is your life, the government sets up organizations to help those who are in need. Things like unemployment. things like state pensions, things where the government actively plays a role in assisting economies. You also have, of course, part of state control and really the incredible development of global South nations are the 4 Asian tigers of South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, who after gaining independence from European control actually become 4 of the most vibrant economies in the world, which is why many people drive South Korean cars and why a lot of trade comes out of Hong Kong, and it's one of the wealthiest cities in the world. And I put TNCs on there twice, so there you go. One of the coolest things about what I find about globalization is just the really fun pictures you can get when you Google globalization. So things like Coca-Cola, things that we consider American, being all over the world. McDonald's is good. I like this Arabic Kool-Aid advertisement, because that's fun. Oh yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, that was good. Ladies and gentlemen, lastly are the cultural impacts of globalization. And yes, Michael Jackson works as a prime example of that, and of course the wonderful Norwegian Olympics. But globalized culture, something that has happened in the postmodern era, is the creation of a sort of single unified culture to some degree. Of course, there's a lot of syncretism that's going to occur everywhere, but largely what you're going to see is the spreading out of American culture. That's going to be the Americanization of the world. Music. Michael Jackson is somebody who is incredibly popular all around the world. And if you took my class first semester, you've already watched the video of the Asian inmates from some jail in Southeast Asia who during their rec time learned the entire Thriller dance, which is really fun. Television and film. Television and film is also something that sees incredibly Americanized thanks largely to Hollywood. Because of the model of Hollywood, you actually see different versions of Hollywood popping up all around the world. If you were in my class, you probably watched Mangal Pandey, which is an example of Bollywood films, right? Everybody's really excited. Bollywood films. I've heard that... I've heard Iran currently has a booming film industry as well. And so you see these sorts of international film organizations largely modeling themselves after Hollywood, but still inserting a little bit of their own culture as well. A prime example of the globalization of music is the development of reggae, which takes a unique form in Jamaica, but however mixes jazz elements and other elements as well from other places. Oh! I don't have pictures of it. There are places around the world that reject Western culture. Most notably, you're going to see this, and I use Barbie as an example to do this. But you see exceptions, people who actually actively, or groups of countries that actively reject the Americanization. And if you look at Barbie doll, when we think about Barbie doll, it's the impossible dimension. She's got blonde hair. She's constantly smiling with a semi-opened mouth. She can wear whatever clothes she wants, whenever she wants. She has complete control over her boyfriend, Ken. She lives in a beautiful house and drives in a... Wow, Cassie, really agreeing with that. Driving in her convertible. Iran and Japan wanted to counter the popularity of Barbie, and so they create their own versions of Barbie. The Sarah Barbie doll in Iran is actually one that instead of having a boyfriend, her good friend is a Muslim cleric. She is dressed from head to toe, all of the coverings there. Her mouth is actually closed, like Iran would believe that women's mouths should be. Other exceptions there too. In Japan, there's the popularity of what's called the Lika doll. Same thing, instead of a car accessory, her accessory is all around childbirth and child rearing. So you can get a wonderful carriage to go with that as well. Again, slightly closed mouth as well, because in Japan, tradition is just more cultural. It's not necessarily seen as an anti-feminist movement. Both of those places would say they're actually allowing for more freedom for women, just in different ways. So it's just a way of looking at globalized culture from a slightly different angle. Probably the coolest things we see happening, or I guess that's really not true. That's really bad for me to say. A very cool thing, in my opinion, is the globalization of sports. And this has created incredible improvements in world sports, and largely thanks to the reinvigoration of the Olympics. The modern Olympics becomes a movement starting in the late 19th century, and then since has becoming more and more popular. I don't know about you, but my wife and I probably have never been closer than when we got to enjoy the Olympics together. Every single night we watched as much Olympics as we possibly could, and we loved every second. I watched archery, for crying out loud, and I was thrilled with archery. And personally, my favorite is the Winter Olympics because that's when we all realize the supremacy of the Norwegian culture, because Norway consistently goes home with the most gold medals of any country around the world. Not Canada, no. Norway. And I had a competition with Mr. Burroughs. It was the Dutch and the Norwegians, and Mr. Burroughs had to hang my Norwegian flag in his classroom because Norway got more gold medals than the Dutch. Anyway, and then of course, as Peter is well aware, one of the elements of a globalized sport is the invention of the World Cup. That happens in cricket, that happens in rugby, we have the World Baseball Classic, obviously soccer. You see, is there a World Lacrosse? Nice, there's International Lacrosse. For crying out loud, the NFL played a game in Mexico City this year, which is pretty awesome. Okay. You also have the creation of New Age religions. Religions like Scientology that are a blend of both Eastern and Western traditions. And then, of course, racial conflict. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end the lecture on this, but it really is a poignant thing because it's something that we are actively living through right now. Something that we've seen is really the fallout of a globalized culture. You're actually living through a time where people are beginning to rebel against globalization. And so you see leaders in the United States, across Europe, are being elected on an anti-globalization platform. France just had its last election on Sunday, and a centrist was elected. However, the other option was somebody who was incredibly nationalistic and anti-globalist, who wanted to limit immigration to Japan, not allow people to come into that country, and really restrict their involvement in the European Union. And so you see this sort of anti-globalization attitude. In response, many of the communities in Europe and around the world are already integrated incredibly. And what that has caused are some racial conflict. So one of the things that you see in France is an anti-Muslim sentiment. Now, I've never been to France. I can't speak to it. But what I can speak to is when I did go and visit Norway, and when I lived in the city of Oslo for a summer, I can tell you there was a section of the city that was heavily Pakistani. And that was the bad part of the city to go to. I thought it was fun. But bad part of the city to go to. In addition, there was also a sort of racial prejudice against Polish people, because Polish people were immigrating to Norway, becoming a part of their socialist system, largely getting all of those benefits, and then also taking a lot of the menial jobs that Norwegians weren't doing. And so there's a lot of racism that occurs because people are now forced to live together in different areas. So that's just something to be aware of, and it's something that happens. It's something that's happening all around the world. As far as the College Board goes, if you know vaguely about the civil rights movement in the United States, then you have something to talk about there. Yes?
So, is current events, are we allowed to use those as pieces of our synthesis?
Postmodern era is until present day. You want to talk about Donald Trump? You want to talk about the election of Macron? You want to talk about the Dutch elections that are happening, which are heavily nationalistic. You want to talk about the reinvigoration of neo-Nazi parties in Germany and Italy. You can go ahead and do so. You want to talk about any sort of current event that you know, you can. Present game. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's go quickly over to our Neo page, because our last thing that we want to look at is the document-based question. The DBQ. And what I will do is go over and remind you what you need to do. Eric.
So
Not necessarily. The trend has been early modern and on, but that's not necessarily the case. There have been a few that have been about the post-classical era. There's been one that was comparing Roman and Han attitudes toward technology, which is fun. There's been a few on others. I can't guarantee anything, Eric. I wouldn't be shocked if there was something on globalization. And I wouldn't be shocked if there was something on migration. I wouldn't be shocked. I didn't talk about migration, did I? Well, that's another thing that happens in the postmodern era. And 20 million people died. And China becomes a nationalist country. Yeah. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you go to the essay formats DBQ and LEQ, go to the DBQ document-based question, and if you go to the actually, you know what? Just go straight to the communism and feminism DBQ. This will go way faster if we just look and read all the directions together. So, ladies and gentlemen, go to the communism and feminism DBQ, which, by the way, if you're thinking you're in my class right now, hey, we wrote this on Friday. No, it's a different one. I like this one. It's a different DBQ, but what I want to go over is everything that you need to include in the document-based question. Ladies and gentlemen, the difference between a DBQ and an LEQ is really just instead of pulling information randomly out of your head, you're mostly using documents. Things that the College Board is giving you. Their main goal in giving you this is to test your ability to use documents. I mean, really, the College Board has made an incredible shift in the way that they expect AP World History to be taught. It used to be that the multiple choice questions were just multiple choice. What do you remember? Now every single question has some sort of document attached to it. Most of the short answers will have a document attached to it. The DBQ will have 7 documents attached to it. So it's something to know that you want to know how to read these documents and know what they're looking for. Oh, is that a stretch? So, ladies and gentlemen, the DBQ is very similar to the LEQ. You need to have a thesis. You need to use documents in order to provide evidence. You need to have some sort of synthesis in your conclusion paragraph. Those things don't change. It's going to be a 4-paragraph essay. It's going to be an intro paragraph, 2 bodies, and a conclusion paragraph. Does that make sense? So the DBQ is largely very similar. However, there are some things that you have to remember to do, largely revolving around the use of documents. Number 1, they're going to give you a set of 7 documents. It's your job to figure out, A, how each of the documents responds to the question, and B, how the documents relate to each other. And there's 3 types of relationships that you need to know. And I know that some of you are thinking, wait, I thought I already knew about all the relationships. And anyway, the 3 types of relationships that you need to know are contradiction, corroboration, and qualification. You are to use those words in your essay. Smack the reader in the face. Make them breathe a sigh of relief because you're going to say, these documents corroborate to say blank. These documents contradict to say blank. Yes. You do not have to use all 3. That's why it says and or. At the very least, you'll find documents that corroborate. Does that make sense? It used to be called grouping. But now they've told you how to group documents. Yes?
So, in all your testing things, they just do the same?
Yeah. It can all be historical context. You just have to use that. Cool? So, ladies and gentlemen, you need to find the relationship between the documents. Next, by the way, it says you need to use 6 of the documents. You will use all of them. Don't rely on 6, because if you use 6 and you screw up one, you don't get that point. So use all 7 and give yourself a buffer. Cool? All the documents are edited to fit the purpose of the essay, so that makes sense. Another shift is you have to source the document. Now, Ms. Jacobson and I have both been using the exact same acronym in order to do this. Because you need to look at the author's point of view, purpose, historical context, and or intended audience for at least 4 of the documents. So if you've used the acronym HIPPO, you should be ready. So you're going to HIP all of the documents. Cool? You need to at least use it in 4. Now, I want to say this to everybody because it's something we're focusing on my classes right now. Identifying the point of view, the purpose, historical context, or the audience is not enough. You need to explain how that is significant to the understanding of the document. In a sense, why does it matter? Who cares what the author's point of view is? You have to explain that. Does that make sense? Additionally, you need to provide 1 instance of outside information. So, ladies and gentlemen, you know that in your 2 body paragraphs, you need at least 3 pieces of evidence for each. If you have 1 body paragraph that only has 2 documents in it, that's a great way of pulling in something that isn't mentioned in the document that will also help you prove your argument. Does that make sense? Good. So essentially what that means is if your essay, I'm glad I like honesty. If your essay follows the argument 1, and you have a piece of evidence from document 1, document 3, but you only had 2 documents in there, pull something from your memory that you remember happened in that time period, in that place, and just do what you would do in a normal LEQ. Provide another piece of evidence that wasn't in the documents. That make sense? Okay. That's new. The last new thing is contextualization. So if you were in my class, I made you do this for the LEQ as well. You need to write an introduction paragraph. And with the introduction paragraph, you need to provide the context. So I do the context, and I think of the context this way. I'm sure Black will be better for this. You want to funnel your readers in. You want to start with the general time period. If you get the postmodern era, start with globalization. Start with internationalism. Then you go into the specific place. Talk about how internationalism or globalization impacted that specific place. Then move down to the topic. If the topic is how the Norwegians dominate modern sporting events during Winter Olympics, then talk about that. How because of the Norwegian superiority in skiing and shooting, they are able to dominate the field. Anyway, that should lead to your thesis statement. Ladies and gentlemen, 1 sentence, 2nd sentence, 3rd sentence, 4th sentence. 1, 2, 3, 4, intro paragraph done. Cool? Say it again. The postmodern era saw increasing interconnectedness throughout societies around the world. The Norwegians were no exception to this as they became increasingly involved in both European and global politics. One way that they became involved is through global sports, like the modern Winter Olympics. From 1914 to present day, the Norwegians have been the most dominant. Two causes for the Norwegians being the most dominant athletes in the Winter Olympics is their ability to adapt to any cold environment and their incredible work ethic. Does that make sense? Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, guess where I got this from? the instructions. When you get the DBQ, your first step, Bailey, is to do what? You will read all of the instructions because I guarantee when you get to the DBQ on Thursday, you are going to be doing this. And then you're going to get your other pen and you're going to do this. And then you're just going to say, I give up. Right? You're going to be nervous. You're not going to remember corroborate because no human uses the word corroborate. You're not going to remember qualified because what? We're not talking about your times in track. So you're not, the whole idea is you're going to need to be reminded. This is your checklist. Read it over. And you never know. The College Board might say, if you don't write this essay, you automatically get a 5. They won't do that. But you never know. Bailey, what is the second step to doing a DBQ? Ladies and gentlemen, you want to break down your prompt. Let me model this for you now. Especially because sometimes when we get nervous, we don't remember what type of prompt we're dealing with. Using the documents provided, Nate, and your knowledge of world history, analyze the degree. What type of essay? Say it louder, Cassie. Periodization. Analyze the degree to which communist movements affected women's struggle for rights in the 20th century. They want you to break down into EPEX or SPICE. Bam! They want you to break down into SPICE the degree to which communism impacted women's struggle for rights. To what degree did communism help or hurt? What continued, what stayed the same? Before communism and after communism, how was women's life similar and different? Does that make sense? So in your thesis, you won't forget to put the word mostly. Got it? No, that's your analysis statement, which you don't have to do in your DBQ. Bailey, what is step 3? You then need to brainstorm. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't highlight the importance of this enough. I know. A lot of you are just, you're efficiency machines. You are. And you're saying, Mr. O, the clock's ticking, I don't got time to waste. Here's the deal. Once you think about this, you want to start activating your brain. The more you get your brain ready to ingest a lot of information, the better you're going to be. So I want you to take 15 seconds. 15 seconds, not right now, but on the DBQ. Take 15 seconds. What do you remember about communism and feminism? That largely it didn't do anything. They tried a lot, but it didn't really do much in the end because they got tired. And Joseph Stalin said in 1930 that the women's problem was solved, but it wasn't. Does that make sense? Bailey, step 4. This is nerve-wracking. Come on, you know what to do next. This is when you begin to analyze the documents. Those of you in first semester, give me your eyes here. Ladies and gentlemen, you might remember the way the documents look. They'll always have a box around them. It'll always say document 1 at top, and they will always give you the source. What you want to do is go around the horn. Because you want to make sure you're setting yourself up to have everything ready for writing this essay. So on the left-hand side, you might want to draw a little box on your piece of paper just to remind yourself. On the left-hand side, you want to hit the document. Much of what, and that's historical context, intended audience, point of view, and purpose. Hip it. Right? You want to hit the document. A lot of what you're looking for in HIP is going to be here. I've seen some incredibly efficient students, instead of writing out the HIP here, they simply label it here. That make sense? I don't mind it. I don't like it, but I don't mind it. I actually like it a lot. At the top, you want to figure out what category. You might find that the documents fit in your brainstormed categories here. But write that category. Or in other words, how does the document answer the question? So after you read it, how does it respond to communism and feminism? On the right-hand side, what I write is corroborate, contradict, and qualify. And any documents as I'm reading that I think work together or corroborate, I write that number. Any documents that I think contradict, I write that number. And any documents that I think qualify or help to understand the degree more, I put there. Does that make sense? That's going to help you start to put those pieces together. Lastly, if you can, at the bottom, this is where you write outside information. What else do you know that isn't in this document that helps you to agree with what the document is saying? Like the Zenit-Del, like the Cuban Federation for Women, right? Any questions on that? Step 5 is put it all together. Come up with your categories. You can do that at the very bottom of the DBQ. You can do that for the very bottom of the DBQ, and then begin writing your essay. If you want to look at, and I'll just show it up here for time's sake, you want to then begin writing your essay. Here's how I suggest outlining your DBQ. You start with your introduction, fairly standard. Give your contextualization. If you wanna just write that down. If you had this on a, if you go home and print this out, you can put your little thing there. Your contextualization, time period, place, topic. Then go into your thesis. Your body paragraph is your topic sentence grouping all the documents. I thought I need to put an updated one up here. And I'll write it. Actually, let me pull it up because this is important. I want to make sure I'm giving students good information. AP World PLC. This is what happens when you're a teacher and you put way too much into everything you do. Okay, there we go. And no, I don't have too many tabs open. Okay, there you go. Eventually, my computer will catch up, hopefully. Maybe not. Okay. So, here's your thesis statement. While some documents show blank, other documents show blank. Shows that there's going to be corroboration, shows there might even be contradiction. While some documents show a continuity was this, others say it mostly changed in this. While some say a cause is this, others say an effect is this. Get it? Okay? Body paragraph 1 should start with this sentence frame. Use it. Smack the reader in the face. Make it easy for them. Documents blank, blank, and blank. Corroborate to say blank. It's bad. Don't tell Miss Bagdanov. Don't tell Mr. Kuroshek. This is god-awful writing. But do it. You then go through your evidence from the document. You need to utilize the document. So make sure you connect it to your argument. I say plus sourcing in that first sentence. And that's choosing one of the hip. Explain it. Tie your evidence to your thesis. You'll do that for those 3. Your second body paragraph. If it fits, and I will think that it probably will, a good second paragraph starter, contradicting the above, documents blank, blank, and blank corroborate to say blank. I'm using the College Board language to make it easy. Same thing, within one part of your body paragraph, you want to include outside information. So if you wanted to add, after C in your first paragraph, as your third piece of evidence, oh, I guess I should have made this italicized. There you go. That make sense? Then your conclusion paragraph is your restated thesis, and your synthesis. Nate.
Besides outside evidence, what are the like tricky things that we have to put in?
The hips.
So is that like the four authors view, purpose, and
Yep, and that's where you want to explain why it's significant. That's why you want to explain why it's significant. And I can show you an example of that if you're in my class today. You can go because I'm just going to show what I did today in class. But just to show you an example of that, this was a DBQ that was slightly similar, talking about how communism impacted the lives of women in Cuba. And just to show you, document 1, here's how I explain document 1. Let me make this massive so you can see it, because 250% is not enough. Document 1 provides an excellent starting point as it describes the way the Spanish Civil Code gave men the patria potestad, or patriarchal power over his family, before 1959. That's me utilizing the document, showing that there's evidence that shows how women's rights were impacted by communism. I then go on to explain the historical context. When I say pre-revolutionary Cuban society was heavily influenced by Spanish traditions, which included a machismo culture where manliness was preferred over feminine qualities. I'm not only explaining the historical context for which that developed, I'm explaining how that would impact women's rights in Cuba during this time.
so that's a lot.
You do that for 4 documents.
Okay, so it's only for, and then
2 per paragraph. 4, 1, and 3. Or 4 and 1, but I do 2 and 2. Oops. I would do that DBQ that I posted on that Neo site. Thank you for being here. I appreciate the extra 5 minutes that you spent. Have a great night. You're going to do great.
Hello. How's your day been?